Good afternoon to everybody on a rainy morning or afternoon rather, wherever you are in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore. We're finally getting our long-awaited rains. We have a very unique and exciting topic that we're going to have a conversation on this afternoon. The germ of this topic's idea was born out of a conversation I had with Shailesh Bhai, and this was looking at our clients. By the way, GovEVA is a company in the ESG sustainability space, which Shailesh Bhai helped me co-found. And over the last 1 year, we've seen a lot of our clients who are in the pre-IPO, aspiring to be IPO space, wholeheartedly embracing ESG. And that's when Shailesh Bhai said, we should have a larger conversation and spread the word. So welcome to all of the participants who are joining us today. I will just take the next couple of minutes to introduce our panelists, although they don't need much introduction, but let me just run through the formality of running you through their excellent CVs. So as our host and at the helm today, we have Shailesh Haribhakti. Shailesh Bhai, as he's fondly called. I say he's a CA by training and in his DNA, but at his heart, he's a sustainability champion. And aligned with the fact that he has graced too many boards all across India over the last 3 to 4 decades, he has kind of a bird's eye view of the troika of sustainability, business, and finance. And I think him chairing this session this afternoon with our illustrious speakers. The next one I would like to bring to your attention is Dr. Mukund Rajan. He is a doyen and one of the key members of the strategy team and also the earliest brand custodian of the Tata Sons. Dr. Mukund Rajan also helped shape a lot of our sustainability ESG policy in India, being part of committees at SEBI as well as FICCI. And today he chairs and runs ECube Investments, which is a platform around everything to do with ESG. Next, all of us on this call, panelist participants, for all of us, Swiggy today is a household name as consumers, but when you think of the finance and sustainability community, I think Rahul Bothra is also becoming a household name. He has led Swiggy's journey right from the start as your illustrious CFO, navigated them through the early funding rounds, follow-ons, IPOs, and now helping them on their path to profitability. And then finally, we have Vaishali Nigam Sinha. Vaishali helped co-found one of our biggest and most proud national assets that all of us have, which is in ReNew Energy. If you look at her CV from what she's done and what she continues to do, I think the best way to describe her is an ardent climate warrior who also combines a very sharp business mindset. So with this, I will hand this over to Shailesh Bhai and ask him to get this session going.
Thank you very much, Jangu, and my very, very warm and special welcome to every participant, and particularly to Dr. Mukund Rajan, Rahul Bothra, and Vaishali Sinha. All of you are dear friends, and we've all participated in the sustainability journey together, and therefore it is a delight for me to kick this off. For me, as Jangu mentioned, sustainability is life itself. It is not a department, not a disclosure obligation, not a line item that CFOs tolerate. It is the operating condition of any enterprise that intends to be standing a decade from today. Every person in an organization, the entire ecosystem, must be super motivated to contribute. Every supply chain must be optimized. Every cost must trend towards zero through absolutely clear-cut deployment of technology. And today, autonomous agentic AI, driven by reinforcement learning and recursive self-improvement, is becoming the order of the day. Therefore, sustainability is not a slogan, it is a direction of travel. Let me set the stakes for this conversation very clearly. ESG scoring on a DRHP, on a DRHP stage company, happens quietly, well before anyone walks into a roadshow. By the time management is pitching its story, the score has already been formed, and it is already deciding how much of the book certain investors are even permitted to participate in. Several ESG mandated funds simply cannot come in below a threshold. Prefer not, simply cannot. The mandate forbids it. And so the conversation you think you are having on the roadshow was in truth settled weeks earlier by a number you never negotiated. This gap creates a 10 to 15% discount on perceived governance and disclosure weakness. This is set in the pricing, and you really will find it very difficult to claw back. And therefore, the better part of wisdom and valor is to make sure that you have your ESG strategy in place way up front. So I want to move this room away from a habit of mind. Stop thinking of ESG as CSR. Stop thinking of it as a compliance cost to be minimized. Start treating it with exactly the same vigor you apply to financial due diligence, because that is precisely how institutional investors already treat it. They are running your governance, your disclosure quality, and your environmental exposure through the same analytical machinery they run your cash flows through. If you're still treating ESG as a brochure while they are treating it as diligence, you are negotiating yourself. You're negotiating against yourself. So what are the benefits to IPO bound companies? Reframed correctly, the benefits for such a company are concrete. They are financial. First, access. Just the credibility of the investor base, just the quality of the base is going to be determined by your ESG stand. Second, a much tighter pricing band so that the variability and the risk associated is mitigated. Third, a low cost of capital after listing. This is also very important, that the debt that you will raise post-IPO will also come at a significant quantum lower than if you did not have an outstanding ESG credential. And fourth, a more aligned long-term shareholder register, which will sustain, which will retain, and which will get committed to the company. So where is the measurement going? Let me connect this to where the technology is actually going, because it changes what credible will mean. The weakness in ESG has never been the idea, it has been the measurement. Subjective, gameable, lagging, inconsistent between raters. That is the real reason a skeptical CFO can dismiss it as noise. But objective ESG ratings must, and increasingly will, follow the same logic, reshaping everything else by recursive self-improvement, autonomous agentic systems that ingest primary operational data like energy draw, supply chain provenance, water usage, port decisions, real-time disclosure, and refine their assessment continuously rather than issuing a stale annual verdict. When the measurement becomes objective, continuous, and hard to gain, the ESG score stops being a matter of opinion and becomes a matter of fact. And facts get priced faster and more ruthlessly than opinions ever did. This is why early implementation of ESG is such an important and critical issue. And so I'm very delighted to have this extraordinary panel with whom we are going to discuss what needs to be done to actually establish that and what are the benefits they have seen and derived. from actually leading the way to making sure that ESG becomes life itself for the corporation and gets into the DNA extremely early. No company today can raise equity or debt without an articulated, early implemented ESG posture. That is the premise. Let us now converse and build how that survives the scrutiny that is coming. Scrutiny that will soon be continuous, autonomous, and unforgiving of anything that is not real. And with that, let me move into the set of questions that we would like to debate with our extraordinary panel. Let me begin with you, Vaishali. You built ReNew's ESG program from founding through a NASDAQ listing under intense global scrutiny. What specific systems or disclosures mattered most to the institutional board?
Yeah, hi, Shailesh bhai. Thank you, first of all, for organizing this conversation. It's really a pleasure to be here with such reputable industry experts. So I guess I'll do my bit and start slightly on a slightly radical note. I think our ESG story was not necessarily driven by a listing of sorts. It was really about, as you rightly mentioned, it was in the DNA of how we wanted to build our business. And so our story really started as we started the business. And there was a lot of debate when we started about, how clean are clean energy companies. And that used to really rattle me a little bit. And, I wanted to really, I wouldn't say prove, but I wanted to run our business in a clean way. That was my agenda. Of course, I have a spouse who's the founder of this company, and I wanted us to stay away and have our own path. So that was my path, that how do we not only create assets and gigawatts, but how we do that is important. So that's where it started. It wasn't early, it wasn't late, it wasn't about a listing, it was about how we did business. And I think what that does is that it really helps you look at the social economic value you create for the company, where folks like Rahul, and in our case it's Shailesh, our CFO, believe that what you're doing is creating value for them. And the opportunity cost of ESG, of not doing ESG, becomes quite evident, right? And so therefore the journey becomes an inherent part of your strategy. So I just want to put that on the table, and that is how we started our activity as far as ESG is concerned. I wasn't board driven. It was function driven to the management and then to the board, and then it became like we were all one with respect to our mission. But just to answer your question very quickly, so for us, it was really not a rating exercise, but eventually it is all about rating. It's all about the metrics. It's all about what you deliver. Because as you rightly said, that in my investor calls over the last 5 years, there have been very few questions investor ask us. But there's a huge amount of reward when they see what we are doing. But if we don't do this, there is potentially a penalty. And so it's a little bit of a taken for granted with a huge amount of value. I think in terms of, just to give you an overview, how we raise capital, the kind of capital which comes to us, how we, build our partnerships. And so it's long-term value creation, and we define the long-term and the short-term goals very specifically, so that it's crystal clear from the board to folks on our sites as to what is the goal we are working towards quarter on quarter. And I think what investors really want to see is really not quick fixes. They really do want to see a trend line. They want to see data. They want to see trend lines. And once they see that, they're happy, right? Absolutely. And you get rewarded. So I'll pause here. I don't want to take...
Vaishali, what you are saying is such music, but should be music to everybody's ears. Get this whole sustainability piece into your DNA. For you, it was fantastic because you were setting up a renewables company anyway. But for everybody, it now becomes a part of life. So thank you for that insight. Rahul, coming to you, you took Swiggy through one of India's most closely watched listings. When you sat across from institutional investors during the roadshow, how much of the conversation was actually about ESG? And did you see it move the price or stabilize the range or make people stay?
Thank you so much, Shailesh. It's a privilege to be here amongst a very august panel. And I would say that we are probably just starting off as an organization, as a company, but something that we had believed it right from the very beginning, right? Because if you look at the overall, say, ESG, and if you take the S part of it, the number of stakeholders that, Swiggy supports in the entire ecosystem is such a critical part of our overall evolution, right? Of the business model itself, that only at the risk of impacting our core business itself, that we would be shying away from making the right steps. So I think where my journey, obviously, while the IPO journey began, we IPO'd in 2024. But one of the key lessons that I learned was in an earlier listing, and this was in a global example. And this was in the similar sector, a company called Deliveroo, which listed in UK. So this company, during its overall business strategy, roadshow, etc., was not able to identify the levers of, especially in the European context, the overall gig workers' welfare, and the overall contribution to the company was not well articulated. So much so that the key institutional investors, and especially in the international context, a lot of large investors stayed out and actually boycotted that issue, right? And this was as a run-up to the listing day. And guess what? On listing day, the stock cracked 1/3, like 30%, discount that it got listed, because the key institutional investors stayed out of one very specific reason, that they were not able to articulate what was their strategy to be able to make it a sustainable part of their business model, which is the whole gig worker support ecosystem. So that basically meant that there was enough example for us that we can't take this lightly. The same time, I do have to acknowledge, and you talked about, hey, how much of investor talk time does it really cover in the roadshow? I would say very little, right? Because most of that has actually, the screening has happened before the actual meeting in the roadshow, right? There are a lot of organizations, today, whether it's MSCI or ISS, etc., who look at your reporting, all the disclosures that you've made in your public filings, and then rate you, which then the institutional investors uses as a screening to even give you a meeting.
Correct.
Right. So those are, I think, very
Where
important.
Your entry ticket.
Exactly, right. So you wouldn't even be getting a meeting, which means that if you have got a meeting from these investors, you actually crossed the hurdle. And then really the question is not about, hey, what's your ESG score? It's about saying what are the most important aspects of ESG. Now, in our case, it became, as I said, the S and G overtook a lot more from the E, because from an overall ecosystem standpoint, the governance and this is the overall stakeholder was a very important part of this conversation. And that's where we were able to score. And if you talk of governance, right, and one other example that comes to my mind is a listing that never happened because of this specific reason, right? And this was 2019. We've all heard of WeWork, and WeWork filed for public, for public filing, and there were issues raised around, the related party transactions, issues raised around the overall shareholding rights, issue raised as a lot of governance issues, which basically did not even let the issue, roll, right? So I think, and for us in our example, right, if you think of how did we, tackle the whole governance issue, whether it's having our independent directors at least 2 years ahead of our listing. So we did not even have a plan of listing or a timeline of listing when we actually inducted the first set of independent directors on our board. So the lot of what you do, what you say, and ultimately disclose gives you that, I would say, right to enter into these conversations. And this value discovery probably, it'll be hard for me to tell you this is the premium that we got. But what I can tell you assertively is this is a discount that we did not get.
Brilliant.
Right?
I think that's equally valuable.
Exactly, right? So that's something which we, as I said, we are able to establish that. And happy to say that, during our first year, this was, we as a newly listed company, we did not have a compulsory audit mechanism, but we voluntarily did an audit. We actually scored a 78 on MSCI index, which puts us in the leaders category. And that opened up a lot of capital pools, especially on the international side. Even domestically, Shailesh, today there are around 11 funds, mutual funds, who have ESG as a mandate.
Correct.
And a large part of their corpus has to be invested in companies that meet a threshold in this, right? And So while the AUM today, I think, is around 10,000 crores, overall small, but this is also expected to grow at a CAGR of 30% over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Absolutely.
So especially for young companies who are, already thinking about it, I think a lot is at stake, and you cannot ignore this.
So many important points you have made, Rahul. I just want to add one small issue that I came to know very recently. That even the banks, in considering their lending to companies, now have a flexibility based on your ESG stance of a few basis points, which can make a huge difference in a large debt raising. So what you say is absolutely critical. And I think India is getting more and more attuned to making sure that the ESG stance is visible. Thank you. Brilliant insights. Dr. Mukund Rajan, we now turn to you. From your experience building governance from the top at Tata, what does credible governance look like for a founder-led company preparing to list, beyond the right board composition, which is simply on paper? What is it that really drives that perception?
Thank you, Shailesh. That's a wonderful question. And it is obviously to do with the group I have had something to do with over 2.5 decades. But very importantly for everyone on this call, I think the fact that Tatas have been around for over 150 years, and for the better part of the last 100 plus years have been amongst the top rated corporates in India, I think says something about governance which is working for them. And in fact, when Vaishali was speaking, I was thinking, wow, so much of what she said is actually connected with exactly what the Tatas have been doing. So I would really summarize what the group has done under 4 very simple heads. And I'll spend a little bit of time on the first one and then quickly capture the other 3. The first, and since you asked about founders, this is really about the tone at the top. I think so much really flows from the quality of leadership that the founder and the founder's direct reports can provide. And there's this old-fashioned sort of focus on mission, vision, and values. But I think that is so relevant even as we speak. And I want to illustrate this with some of the things Tatas have done. So, somewhere in the middle of the last decade at the Tatas, we defined the mission or the core purpose as improving the quality of life of the communities the group serves through long-term stakeholder value creation based on leadership with trust. Thereafter, we crafted a vision that was linked to this mission. So there has to be this alignment, right? And vision, as you know, is sometimes described as a dream with a deadline. And the vision was that within 10 years' time, a quarter of the world's population would experience the Tata commitment to improving the quality of life of customers and communities, as a result of which the Tatas would rank amongst the 25 most valuable enterprises in the world, and the Tata brand would feature within the top 25 corporate and employer brands in the world. So clear outcomes that were linked with timelines to the mission. And finally, you need to have the values that enable all this to happen. And 5 values were identified at the time: integrity, unity, responsibility, excellence. And a new 5th value was introduced for the first time, partly given the ambition to be amongst the best in the world. The value that was introduced, and it's got a lot to do with a lot of the debate that's going on currently on innovation and R&D in Indian industry, this value was pioneering. So the 5th value was pioneering. So I think the learning from Tatas on the tone at the top is, if you can create genuine and authentic alignment between the mission, vision, and values. So it's not just sort of lip service you pay to these, but you genuinely try and articulate this well. You set yourself targets with timelines. I think you're already beginning to be on the road to good governance. The next 3 points and important learnings from Tatas. The first is walking the talk. I think you need proof points of success to energize the organization and to convince stakeholders, including potentially your investors, that this is an organization to take seriously. So the evidence that governance is important for your organization, including the disclosed strategy of the enterprise and the organizational structure which can support good governance. So whether it is in the case of ESG and Sustainability Committee of the board, strong internal audit processes and the like. The third is communication and training. I think there is no substitute for investing time, first of all, in communicating the key messages transparently to all your stakeholders, internal and external, and investing in training for the entire team, which includes the board of directors. We too often assume the board is sort of all-knowing and very expert. But the fact is, even the board needs training and education. Issues like sustainability, ESG, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, you need to invest in all of that. And finally, and this is the fourth and last learning, is again something the others, Vaishali and Rahul, have also mentioned, measurement of effectiveness. As they say, what gets measured gets improved. If you can baseline your performance and demonstrate improvement from year to year and from quarter to quarter, then you can genuinely show that you're committed to doing better. I think these are the four things that really Tatas have done well: the tone at the top, walking the talk, the communication and training focus, and finally measurement of effectiveness. If you can put all of that in place in your organization as a founder, I think you're well on the road to success.
Fabulous. So insightful, Mukund, and so valuable for everybody to take away. Thank you so much. Let me turn back to Vaishali and ask you, Vaishali, that many of the participants today are at a point where their companies or their enterprises are starting off from a low base today. What is a realistic 12 to 18 month build sequence to get to a credible ESG story before a DRHP is filed?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great question, Shailesh Bhai. Just on Mukundan's point, I wanted to say we have a masterclass for our board members, and we have it at least twice a year. So, and we engage them in choosing the topics they see as gap areas, and that's extremely useful. And we have 100% capacity building for the entire organization, which we report here earlier. So these are very important points, and thank you for highlighting those. But I want to keep reiterating there are no quick fixes. But if somebody is wanting to build a credible story, in a 1.5 year time frame, that itself would mean they're looking for a quick fix. But I would say that the first thing is to understand what your starting point is. It's different for every organization. It means different things to different companies, and I think it's really important to do the mapping. I found it the most useful activity. I do it year on year. Before I start anything, I do a gap analysis. Where are we today? And even if we are really doing well, on our scores, and just to give some color on, I know ratings are not really, I always tell my team, no pressure on ratings. If we do well, we do well. And I tell the board as well that do not hold me to alphabets and numbers. They are only good for some time. It's how we are doing, what we are doing. That's really important. Is our data good? Is our trend all right? That's what I'm going to talk about. And I think that really works well. So if I look at the S&P Global CSA, we have a score of 84 on 100, which is really the highest ranked Indian utility sector company has around the world. It places us in the top 10% globally as far as utility companies are concerned. We have an A rating in CDP, and we have a score of 90.41, which is the highest in the electrical utilities space globally, and the highest rating for the MSCI, which is a triple A. So these are, again, as I said, I've never fixated to ratings, but if you look at what you want to do, it really works out well. So do understand what are your gaps, and then I think that is the part which we need to work on. It's important to map the ESG risk. It's very important to understand who your peer group is. I think all of us have that sense of competitiveness, and I can tell you, none of us like to feel competition on our tails. So I think that's really important. It drives the team. It drives all of us. And it's also important. It gives them, investors a relative benchmarking of what you're doing, how you're doing. And you must, as Mukund rightly mentioned, communicate. You have to be able to communicate in your ESG story. And that's why at ReNew, the ESG story, the brand, not the ESG function, the brand, marketing, we all sit in the same sort of group which I oversee, and that's very helpful because it is a part of your entire strategic narrative, honestly. And sometimes we just do things and don't communicate. I think so. Just once you identify your starting point, I think it's really important to create a governance structure. I found it extremely useful from having a board which gets ESG is super important. So at ReNew, we have a global board, folks who've served on, I would say, entities which look at sustainability globally, to local experts. And then I have the AppCom, which is the most senior management team. They report into me for sustainability, and it's not vice versa. So otherwise, I don't have senior leaders saying, oh, by the way, what are we doing in sustainability? Oh, how do we need to do? What do we need to do? Is the cost of doing this something which is acceptable? No. You should come and understand what needs to be done in the beginning of the year. We will sign on a goal for the year, and you will report to me quarter on quarter on what needs to be done, right? So there is agency and ownership in the management team. And then, of course, we have another governance layer at the site because, we are a very dispersed organization, and we have climate champions. And these are folks who build the culture in the organization. And I feel if you don't have an ESG sustainability centric culture, nothing will change. Right? It's only going to be like, okay, data, acha, water ka data, waste ka data. No. Do you believe in this? Right? And so I work very closely with my folks to ensure that they get why are we doing this? And it makes a huge amount of difference. Honestly, if I could look at India, just to segue a little bit, Shailesh bhai, our leadership, right? If you look at our Prime Minister, he's deeply committed to sustainability. I think it's in his DNA, right? If you look at other countries, and I'm not going to name them, you know who I'm talking about. Okay, and you know what happens then, right? Yes. Companies continue to be sustainable. They continue their ESG journey. All they're doing is they're whitewashing their websites to show, not use a, ESG acronym and all of that. But so essentially, I think when there is this culture and this vision, as Mukund, you rightly pointed out, which I love this point you talked about, that vision is a dream with a deadline. I've written that down. I love that. I think we all need to have a vision with a deadline. I think that is, and the values, this is what binds us to do what we are doing. And I think in this area, it's really important. So I would say that building your data spine is the next important thing in a half-year time frame. I think we must all do. And I think we need to be clear about what our material metrics are, because if you don't know what the material metrics are, you will not know how they're going to create value for you, right? So I think it's really important to list those and align it with your sort of risk register. So the sustainability ESG register must be intertwined in your sort of risk register, broadly speaking, for the organization. And I think obviously, then getting all of this ready for investor disclosure, communication, the ratings, participation in the top quality ratings, which matter to investors, identifying them, keeping your eyes on the regulation, and all of that needs to be woven very quickly. And it's still possible in that time frame. Please focus on how you're doing this. Don't do it for a checkbox exercise, because it's very clear to an investor whether ESG is a checkbox exercise or it is in the DNA of an organization. So just keep reminding it, have it on your dartboard, that why are we doing this, right? How does it matter? Is it really creating value? And I can tell you at ReNew, we only do this, if I could dare to say, not more for the investors or the regulators, because it's really created value for the organization. It's created long-term and short-term value, and we measure it and we report it internally so that everybody is crystal clear about it. I hope I've answered your question, Shailesh.
Brilliantly, Vaishali. I think this is the most significant point that we can leave behind for all our participants, that it is a matter of economic advantage that will be delivered through the ESG stance that you described. And you described the method that can be followed so beautifully, step by step. And thank you for sharing that so openly. Rahul, building from what Vaishali said, is there anything on ESG you wish Swiggy had started 12 to 18 months before the DRHP was filed and didn't?
So in most parts, Shailesh, as I said, we actually voluntarily took an audit, of our the BRSR report, though we were not mandated, which meant that it was more of an upstream activity for us. We also, had a 12 to 18 month kind of window. It's almost like the plumbing activity before, say, the home is built, right? That if you don't get it right, and also what happens is while you are preparing your, say, filing documents, there are obviously various work streams. There is the business section, or the legal section, which your advisors are doing, the overall business strategy section, which your IR team and the business teams are doing, and then there is the BRSR, the ESG report, which your sustainability and, say, compliance teams are doing. If you only wake up at that time, I think it's going to be extremely hard for you to be able to justify a lot of numbers, a lot of data that sits within your organization, your carbon footprint, your impact on some of the stakeholders that you engage with. It's very hard to kind of stitch up a lot of this data, which is auditable, verifiable, because as Vaishali said, more than the absolute metric, it is the ability to measure it and disclose it, right? Because I think, yes, it's very hard for us to change our business model to get to a certain score. I think that's not the purpose of this, exercise. The purpose is to that, are you tracking it? Do you have, goals that, you can, even the investors outside can measure you against? So have you, therefore made those right choices?
I can share with this wonderful audience that I must say that the entire checklist that Vaishali mentioned, Rahul had actually implemented at Swiggy and done it so well that it just played a huge role in the way that the IPO went off. So it just tied in totally with what she said. But so Mukund, you sit on SEBI's ESG advisory committee and advise institutional capital almost directly. Walk us through what actually happens inside that ESG scoring process at the DRHP stage. And what are the investors really looking at in your view?
So Shailesh, first of all, I think most institutional investors, what they sort are now quite familiar with the requirements of the BRSR disclosures, the business responsibility and sustainability reporting mandate, which applies, of course, to the top 1,000 listed companies. So there would be a tendency for them to benchmark what they see in a DRHP filing with what they're already familiar with on the listed equity side. But unlike the BRSR, where for the reporting entities, there is typically already track record, there's performance data, associated ESG scores, some level of assurance. Rahul just spoke about the importance of audit. For an entity that's filing its DRHP, much of this may be significantly missing or relatively weak. So institutional investors may still try and conjure up a ESG score, and oftentimes they'll use third parties to do that for them. But I think more commonly, what at least I have seen is they will use their experience and judgment, first of all, to evaluate the ESG and sustainability risks and opportunities that the new entity will need to deal with. And perhaps more importantly, they'll undertake a fair amount of qualitative diligence, right? So they will factor in, I think, depending on the likely post-listing size of the company and whether it will eventually come under the ambit of BRSR reporting as a top 1,000 company, some amount of the cost and resource also that will be required for the company to scale up on BRSR reporting. And all of this, when you put it together, can lead to judgments like potentially reducing the valuation they will ascribe, perhaps seeking covenants from the promoter, or in many cases, avoiding an investment altogether. Now, amongst the issues that I've seen investors really care about, I would probably say that issues bundled under the head of governance tend to be the most critical starting off. And what do I mean by that? Let me illustrate a sort of list of some of the kinds of issues. We talked about the strength and independence of the board. And Rahul talked about how Swiggy invested in having a very high quality board with independent directors well ahead of time. That's very important. Structures to support good governance, including relevant board committees, including, perhaps the CSR committee overlaid with ESG and sustainability. Promoters' skin in the game, so the shareholding they will retain, but also any share pledges that potentially they might have committed to, which gives a sense about how long they're going to stay in the company. Often the red flags that promoters sometimes are guilty of is related party transactions. I mean, too often revenue, risk, cost is buried in other entities that are related parties, and either invite scrutiny if there is inadequate data. Then it's a red flag for the investor saying, I don't have adequate information. Perhaps it's better I stay away from this listing. Of course, regulatory controversies and legal issues, and a lot of the issues around investigations by law enforcement agencies, enforcement directorate inquiries, income tax, all of this will be very important for institutional investors. And finally, I think key management, looking at the track record on attrition, turnover, and key management roles. On the E&S side, environment and social, I think typically the elements that go into the core BRSR are the ones that many institutional investors care more about. But they're also, as I think Vaishali mentioned, quite sort of interested in what is material for that particular business. It's not one size fits all. So on environment, for example, carbon footprint could be a material issue if you're looking at a company that is in manufacturing, just for the sake of argument. But maybe if you're a company into software design and you're going through a listing, maybe it's less relevant. It's not as material an issue. And the point you made a little while back, confidence around how data is being captured is critical. I think the sense that key data relating to material issues is being captured, is available. Only to the extent necessary is it being manually captured and therefore potentially subject to interventions. As much of it as can be automated is going to be important. The sources of data must be clear, reliable, and authentic, and internal controls must be shown to be strong. And alongside this, I also want to say that institutional investors are increasingly now concerned about the organization's ability to track ESG KPIs of their value chain partners. And that's something the BRSR is also bringing up. You don't want a situation where dirty and unsafe work is being outsourced to your value chain and then becomes a future liability or a reputational hazard for the company and its investors. And similarly, around other social metrics, institutional investors will have expectations, employee attrition, wage gaps, promoter pay, use of contract labor versus permanent employment, safety incidents, and so on. So that's typically what I see institutional investors caring about. I think
this is such a comprehensive set of ideas that you have put in place. I think in order to provide some time for our wonderful participants, let me quickly ask all three of you in a sentence to mention what is one fix every DRHP stage company should make in the next 90 days. Mukund, let's start with you because we already have you on screen.
I think something you've done very well, Shailesh, which is create an ESG or a sustainability committee, staff it well, ensure they have responsibility for outlining and articulating the strategy, and link your compensation of management to performance and execution of that strategy. I think starting with a committee, that's the most critical.
Great insight, great input. Vaishali?
Yeah, hi. So now that the committee has been mentioned, that's off the table. I would say that, as Mukund mentioned, supply chain, is super critical. It forms, over 90% of most scope 3s, and that's the toughest part. But I think even KPIs for management within the organization and how you link that to ESG performance is super critical. So we have that all the way across, especially top management. And I would say 90 days, in my view, is not a very long time. So please make sure that the communication out there is crystal clear. So though you may not have that much time, the policies you put, get your websites in order, communicate all that you're doing, from policies to scores to, committees, etc. It should be all out there, crystal clear. We are living in a digital world, and, you're not talking, you're not meeting people and communicating your stories. They are coming and doing whatever they want to, whenever they want to. So be ready and have that crystal clear as well. So communication on publicly available sources is super important.
Brilliant. Rahul?
I'll wear my CFO hat here, Shailesh, and I would urge the participants to first stop thinking it like a cost item and almost think it as an investment to get your growth capital, right? See, because you are coming to the listing universe, you are raising capital, and think of it in dilution terms, in terms of an ROI, right? How you would typically do any capital investment choice. That if 100 basis points reduction, and if you're looking at say 50,000 crore valuation, then you're talking of a 500 crore unlock to your current shareholders, right? Because the discount that I talked to you about, if that doesn't get slapped to you, because that's a very likely, risk that you would be facing when you enter these, set of pools and the capital. So stop thinking like as a cost item and where it's an investment item.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. What a wonderful insight. Great. Sir, I now open this up to our wonderful participants. Please ask the questions, if you like, to individual panelists that you choose. Please go ahead.
Yes, actually, I have a question which has come up in the chat box but is not showing up for all. And this question goes, it's targeted at Vaishali and other panelists as well. And the question reads, do you see any major difference between how international stakeholders and Indian stakeholders look at ESG sustainability? And by stakeholders, this participant means not just investors, but the larger community of buyers and suppliers as well. So that's the question across all stakeholders that we deal with, investors, buyers, suppliers. Is there a variance between how people look at it globally versus how it happens in our country?
I can go first very quickly on this. The answer to that is definitely, it's yes and no, right? At a certain level, certain types of company follow the same practices, similar practices, because what is being asked, for example, by regulators and shareholders is pretty similar, right? But if you look, I was in China recently, and I'd gone for a supply chain sort of visit to a few companies in Inner Mongolia, and it was really fascinating. And the head of our manufacturing business was really nervous about taking me there, because I know when I came back why he was nervous. And it's a very different culture there. I mean, I see them at the World Economic Forum. I hope it's safe to say what I'm saying, because I'm being quite candid. Amazing progress in that country, huge scale, huge amount of progress. But as a sustainability professional, if you talk about level 2, level 3 sustainability, you get a simple answer. Well, we have a certificate. Like, how did you get to the certificate? Let's talk about that. It's not as transparent. So in certain countries, there is more transparency. We talked about the other, Rahul, you talked about the other IPO, which didn't happen. In Europe, of course, there they really care about how you do business and the social responsibility and equity. That matters. And so it's different. So yes, stakeholders demand different things in different parts of the world. And as I said, that when we do a gap assessment or the materiality assessment and the double materiality assessment, or what are the material issues, what is the impact it's having on value creation, social, economic, financial, manufacturing, whatever it is, all of this becomes super important. That's when you understand which ecosystem are you playing in and who is demanding what, and you can then define your strategy to be effective for your company and for your shareholders.
Makes tremendous sense. Rahul, Mukund, any further insights?
Maybe I'll just add to what Vaishali said, that we do notice that Europe, for instance, is perhaps a little bit ahead of the curve on its views on sustainability. Even in the political system, the Green Party has always been quite strong and powerful in the European Parliament. So that geography is certainly leading on a lot of regulation. It's also impacting India, because issues like the carbon border adjustment mechanism are now beginning to hurt industries like Indian steel and their exports. One question you often get asked about the United States, with a lot of the pullback that has taken place, whether it's Environment Protection Agency standards, that were set during the Biden era that have been rolled back under Donald Trump. How is that market sort of looking at sustainability? But the interesting thing, I think, is that many corporations, even in the United States, understand that they have to stay competitive. Donald Trump is here right now, but he may not be there in a few years' time. And they have to compete with European majors. They have to compete increasingly with Chinese majors and with potentially in the future Indian majors. So I think corporates, for the most part, have not, pulled back on their investments in R&D and innovation to stay current with new technologies that can help to address issues like climate change. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed sort of view of what's happening. I think regulators in North America and in the United States in particular are now slowing things down, but I don't think it's here to stay. So if you're an entity that's trying to compete with these markets, I'd say keep your eyes on Europe and try and use that as your as a sort of role model, and make sure that you'll be competitive with European majors, and hopefully that allows you to become a successful exporter to other markets and potentially penetrate those markets. And Donald Trump will certainly be gone someday, so keep that in mind as well.
All of us fondly hope.
Shailesh, we have another question from Maithili CV.
Okay.
And she says, as ESG becomes more and more standardized, what will be the real differentiator for the investor in future? Is it better data, governance, or long-term strategy? You can decide whom to pass it on to.
Rahul, why don't you go with that, because this is your court.
I wish I could choose one and say, hey, this is going to be the North Star, right? Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And I think at the heart of any of this that we're discussing is really about sustainability, right? And sustainability, not just in the context of environment, sustainability in the terms of practices, right? In terms of, fair wages, in terms of, diversification of, of your labor force. So there's a lot of stuff that today, the world is demanding of you. For instance, if we did not have, say, a fair wage, policy, and though we operate in the gig economy sector, our business model is dependent on that. So it's no longer a choice for us to say, hey, can we therefore, save on some social contributions by having this, business model? This business model is for flexibility, but not at the cost of, sustainability. Right? So I think in every aspect of the business, it is extremely important that we look at whatever we are doing, the business practices that we have in force, are they sustainable? And therefore, and do we have goals to also, change them if, for example, there are any red flags or amber flags that are there? Do we have a defined roadmap to change some of them? For example, the fact that we do on the electrification of bikes, right? And there's a lot of legislation coming on. What we as a company are doing on, we have taken a mandate of by 2030, electrifying a large portion of our fleet. And, therefore, what can we do to enable the ecosystem? How are we getting, vendor partners together? How are we enabling, more of our delivery partners to get access to electric bikes? How are we making it economically viable for them? So there's the heart of it. Everything boils down to, are you having the right sustainable practices in every part of your business?
Brilliant. Absolutely. It has to be across the board, and it's becoming so much more critical than ever before. Wonderful. There are now a flood of questions. Jangu?
Yes.
Yeah, give us.
There's one from Mr. Narayanan Chandrasekhar, and I think he's speaking on behalf of a lot of the participants of this show today. And by the way, we have kept this audience for today's conversation very focused to people who are actually filed their DRHPs or on the way to doing that. So it becomes a very valuable thing. Anyway, what Mr. Narayanan is asking here is that every company who may be participating on this conversation today may already be a value chain partner to big companies who may be represented by the panel over here. And his question is, how are these companies facilitating us, and what should we do with the help of our big buyers to help us prepare on ESG and then maybe even take that to the listing process?
Yeah, in your domain, because you mentioned fleetingly about supply chain. So if you can please reply to this question.
You called out my name, right? I
Yes,
lost it.
yeah, scope 3.
Yeah,
Basically,
sure.
scope 3.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great question, and that's a debate I have with a lot of industry folks as well. I think some of the larger cap companies need to do a lot more. So some of the things we are doing is, working with our supply chain, capacity building, rewards and recognitions, and really ensuring that we are engaging with them because their success matters to us as well in a way. So I think a lot of it is just hand holding them through strategic initiatives, helping them see the value creation we've done. So for example, for the first time at ReNew, we had a pan India supplier meet in our company, where we had our a lot of our suppliers attend in person. Our global suppliers participated virtually, and we had kind of master classes. As I said, rewards and recognitions we underestimate. And so I think this sort of engagement, we have a supplier code of conduct, so institutionalizing it at a certain level and then implementing some of these things together, and then rewarding them step by step, in my view, has really helped us engage and align strategies. Sometimes they really don't know where to start, right? And so how you can handhold them, and now we are using their sort of success stories for our narrative, because it forms a very important, a critical part of our scope 3. So I think just that engagement and creating that ecosystem of learning, sharing, and development of emission management is what we do very seriously at ReNew.
Shailesh.
So I think, yes, please, Mukund, please.
So I just wanted to add, I think Vaishali opened with exactly the right comment, which is, I think the large corporates, some of India's biggest conglomerates, need to be doing much more to invest in and support their supply chain partners, whether it is technology, whether it is financing, working in partnership with the banking system, with entities like SIDBI, the Small Industry Development Bank. Also, I think in very large infrastructure projects where vendors typically are gathered together in areas, you have the possibility of creating shared infrastructure, which addresses some of the ESG issues that matter. So you can create common effluent treatment plants, you can create a common solar power park for your vendors around, let's say, a steel plant that is being built by a large conglomerate. So there's lots that can be done. I don't think there's a lack of ideas, but I think particularly at a time when we're all sort of getting a little concerned that there is some amount of concentration in certain industries, I think the large companies need to think about their corporate social responsibility, and that includes, the support they need to give to their value chain partners. So much more, I think we will all be expecting from them.
Fabulous. A conversation like this can really be never-ending. I only promise to everybody whose question has remained unanswered that we will give you a considered written reply to what has not yet been answered. But let me end this conversation by saying how valuable it has been. It has reaffirmed the basic logic of putting sustainability into your DNAs, making it transparent, making it part of your strategy, making it part of the values, the culture, the way that you actually do business. And I think if we can take away that essence from this wonderful conversation, I must tell you, it was amazingly engaging, and we've had a full participation throughout the full hour, which is really remarkable. And I want to thank every participant, and very deeply grateful to you, Mukund, to you, Vaishali, and to you, Rahul, for having participated and made this so very brilliantly engaging and valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was amazing, and all the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.